Hello,
And
everyone.
sorry.
No worries. Hello,
And
everyone. I am Bhuttu Mathews. I'm Vice Chairperson of International Gay Rugby, also known as IGR. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am wonderfully delighted to be joined today by my colleague, the wonderful Charles.
hi, my name is Charles, and Abernathy. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I play for the Columbus Kodiaks, and I go by he, him, his pronouns.
So, everyone, it is our honor and privilege to tell you about the fantastic work that we on the IGR Anti-Discrimination Task Force have done thus far. Um, As you're probably aware, earlier this year, Charles and Megan Gotches published a really wonderful report to assist IGR address internal deficits as related to structural updates. Given that we were approaching our 20th anniversary as a network and as a community, as well as the need to bring our systems up to date in order to reflect our growing and more diverse membership. Adding to that urgency was the shocking betrayal that many of us felt at the hands of rugby's governing body when they unilaterally, and what seemed to us to be an apparent violation of their commitments to us, unilaterally banned trans women from playing elite levels of the sport, which in effect really has an effect of banning them throughout the sport and also imposing onerous, really dumb, unwise restrictions on trans men being able to participate. So all of this really lent a sense of urgency, and as a result of it, we sped up our process of updating our own internal systems. We started from a place of inclusive planning and created a team of 11 members and two external consultants who specialize in organizational change that use equity and inclusion as their primary focus in order to help us identify issues that we may not be aware of because we are involved firsthand in this change process. So, our focus areas were going to be racism, um, transphobia, women's players' rights, affordability, and accessibility. And the thing that we wanted to really bring up in terms of deliverables was a comprehensive anti discrimination and anti bullying policy that will be adopted by each IGR member club in consultation with the regional groups that I'll talk about in a second. And that is culturally and geographically appropriate because how racism looks, for example, in one part of the world is not how it looks in other parts of the world. So we wanted to make sure that our code of conduct would be respectful and appropriate. The second deliverable would be a grievance and mitigation procedures plan that would identify policies, rights, and responsibilities of all parties involved in any grievance or complaint. And the third thing that we were going to deliver would be a continuous education plan that will commit and cement each club's commitment to this process. So I want to talk a little bit about our task force before I go into the actual plan. Our task force is comprised of volunteers. IGR is a volunteer organization, and so is this anti-discrimination task force. In addition to me and Charles, we have members from Argentina, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and South Africa. And our external consultants are from the United States and Trinidad and Tobago. So here, what you can see is on your screen is a list of all the members who are participating, and we represent quite a bit of both hemispheres and quite a bit of the world. And we, for personal reasons, we had a couple of people on the task force that had to drop out, and we missed them a great deal. And we hope they'll be able to continue working with us when we devolve this work into regional groups. But here we are. Our regional country groups are going to be, as you see on the screen, in keeping with what I just talked about in terms of having policies that are culturally and geographically appropriate. We're going to devolve the work, come up with a framework, and then send it down to these regional country groups, which is where we need all of you to step up. And we hope you'll join us in this process. We want anti-discrimination and anti-bullying policies that are culturally appropriate. We want grievance and mitigation procedures that keep your local country's laws and union regulations in mind. And we want to have a continuous education plan that makes sense to each club. Our anti-discrimination task force organizational chart here, is how you see it here. The board of trustees and the board members, which are all the member clubs of IGR, and the trustees, the administrative body of IGR, agreed on this plan that I'd created. And as a result of it, we appointed Charles, the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer of International Gay Rugby, and we started this task force, about which I've already talked about. And very soon we're going to be passing it down to the regional work groups, who will commence their work pretty soon. As you see here, the work group timeline, we're on task C right now. Charles, if you could just bring up the next slide in terms of identifying which, task A, task B, and task C are. So task A and task B were comprised of, constituting our team and appointing external consultants. And what we've been doing so far right now, we're on task C, and we're a little bit behind schedule, but COVID happened. We knew it was happening in July, but we didn't foresee how much it was going to happen. And quite frankly, life is getting in the way. But also the big thing here is that this is extremely important work. Inclusive planning dictates that you have to get the planning right first before you go jump into the implementation. Because if you do the planning correctly, the implementation becomes pretty easy. So we have just finished discussing our mission. We're going to be discussing our vision next. And we've already identified the values that we want IGR to be organized around. And once we are done with the vision part of it, we're going to be kicking it off to the regional groups. Task D, half of it has already been done. As I mentioned, that Charles has been appointed the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. The other appointment that we're waiting on making is identifying a Chief Ethics and Transparency Officer. This is the person who is going to hold us, the administrators of IGR, the trustees, accountable for our work in order to make sure that our work is transparent and honest and above board in all matters. And task E will be the steering committee constituting the regional groups. And as I said before, this is where I hope many more people step up and help us create this plan. Our goal originally was to have this done by May 31st. That we would have this plan in place and everybody would be signed on to it. But given what's going on in the world and our own lives, we're taking this slow. And if this happens by the end of 2021, that's fine, as long as we get it right. That's the important thing here. Our three focus areas, as I mentioned, were the non-discrimination and anti-bullying policy, the grievance and mitigation procedures, and the continuous education plan. So, an example of this will be, as I mentioned, each country's national union will have their own rules, and then each country will have its own laws that member clubs have to adhere by. So we are going to ask you to identify all of those areas and see if there are places where you can legally have language in your own bylaws that adhere to IGR's vision. And if not, then create that conduct plan, create that code of conduct. And with grievance and mitigation, something that we want people to be able to understand is the many ways in which somebody might have a conflict, whether it is within an IGR team itself. And we would leave it up to you to decide if your bylaws and your procedures make it possible for you to address that within your own clubs and societies. Then another area might be where IGR teams have conflicts with the other IGR teams. And this would be something where we would ask each of you to come up with an idea as to how those conflicts can be resolved. We'll, of course, provide you with the framework, but within that framework, we have to adapt those situations to culturally and geographically specific areas. The third one would be, let's say that an IGR team were playing a team in their local matrix where an issue of homophobia or racism came up. How would you deal with that? And this is where we would have to really nail down what IGR's role is and what we can and cannot do. And we would ask you to help us figure out how we can intervene and advocate for you in this matter. And the last thing is, if you had a problem with IGR itself, if anybody had a problem with one of the trustees or the trustee as a body, or with IGR bylaws, how can you address that? That's going to be an important thing. So that's the reason we want to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that our procedures and our policies are always going to be above board. With continuous education, what we want to make sure is that once you've developed your anti-discrimination and non-bullying procedure, that you're always going to be orienting new members who join your clubs about what your policies are. And you're going to make sure that every time your returning members come back for a season or for a year, they sign off on your policies. And if you update them, make sure that everybody else is brought up to date. Charles, maybe you can talk about this stuff.
Yeah. So, what does success look like? So, Bhuttu, I'm also just want to give a round of applause for Bhuttu creating the proposal. It was really great, and I really thank him for, taking what Megan and I talked about in our presentation to IGR and really kind of operating it in a way that is operational. And so success here is having a non-discrimination anti-bullying policy within our respective regions, a grievance and mitigation procedure that really centers around justice and really emulating our values as an organization. And what we do know is with anti-racism and anti-oppression work, it is a continuous education plan. This work is a lifelong commitment. And as an organization, we know that it's just not a training and one and done, but it is an active involvement in knowing how we can create an organization that enables anyone to play rugby. And so how is this work going to happen on a global scale? Well, there are some working tools that we're going to have. This is an example of the regional SWOT analysis. The regional groups will have to do this before they're able to start initiating the conversation. And the purpose of this tool is to have regions understand their strengths, their weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this will also help the IGR Board of Trustees to really understand what is happening on the ground and really allocate resources when necessary. And we do have these regional dashboards here to help the regional work groups organize and track their progress. Again, these are just examples of tools that can be used. And this is kind of what the content looks like within the dashboard. And so this is a place where folks can keep track of their members, update that, track attendance, and also for us leaders in the diversity and inclusion work group to give feedback when necessary. In that dashboard is some areas here. We are an organization that is embracing a learning culture. And so we want to definitely highlight opportunities of lessons learned and also team experiences. And so this is be where you can document those successes and those lessons learned here. There's also an example of where you can store minutes. It's really important that we hold ourselves accountable to this work and have minutes to show our stakeholders and our members and those who are invested in a Rugby for All culture. So how will we be communicating this work to our stakeholders here? Well, we have a website, and on this website will be updated with information from the DNI task force and also provide team highlights. You can also provide feedback as well on here, and this will be the main place for our members and those who are invested in creating a rugby culture where anyone can play. You can sign up to volunteer as well. And so it does take a village to do this work. I love rugby so much and want to share in the community and the sense of belonging that it has given me and countless of other folks around the world. And so we have, again, those 3 focus areas. And so if you can commit to some time in a way that is meaningful for you, please be interested in looking into how you can contribute in the non-discrimination and anti-bullying policy area, the grievance mitigation procedures, and the continuing education plan. Great. And so if you do have any questions or concerns or just want to share this information, please share it with your teams, because it's going to take each and every one of us to just show up. And when I think about diversity and inclusion, it is about that act of solidarity and that action to have us be able to move forward. So, Bhuttu, is there anything else that you would like to add before we end this recording?
No, please reach out to us with your comments, your ideas, your feedback. You can reach me at bhuttu.mathews@igrugby.org, and I'll be happy to receive and hear from you. Thank you so much for being a part of this work, everyone, and especially thanks to you, Charles and Megan, because your report started all this stuff, and this work wouldn't have happened without that brilliant report.
Yeah. Well, and for anyone who thinks that they may not know much about diversity and inclusion, I would challenge that and say that you do, and that you have a lived experience that can benefit our organization. And so you do have something to add. You add something every single day when you show up and often on and off the pitch. And so with that, thank you so much. And I look forward into working with y'all.
Thank you, everyone. Love you all. Hope to see you soon in Ottawa, if not before.
Bye.
Bye-bye.